I'm a senior lecturer at Communication Science, and I teach in the bachelor, the master's, but in 2021 I started a project on academic rubrics, the academic writing rubric, and the idea was that in our program we noticed that our lecturers were very much struggling with supervising academic writing assignments. It took them lots of time to provide feedback, and the aim of my project was to come up with a tool that might help them a bit, assist them a bit in providing feedback without compromising the quality of our education. So that was the aim of our project. And TLC was so nice to also help fund this idea, to pilot it in communication science. And now we're ready to share with you the results. And it's also been made available to the entire FMG. And I will share with you in a minute how you can maybe also benefit from our findings. So, but before, I have sort of like an overview from our problem to our solution in 5 steps. But before I would like to dive into our problem, I would like to acknowledge first that we wanted to implement this project on an academic writing curricular level. So it was sort of, the project is sort of developed to support the entire academic writing curriculum in the bachelor from the 1st year to the 3rd year. And this is a long-term intervention. It's still going on. I see some fellow colleagues here who are actually still involved with the project. They are working with the newest version of the rubric right now as we speak. And we will also evaluate and improve this even more. And to get this implemented in our program, we needed to have lots and lots of support from our teachers. So it's not something you can implement in your program that easily. It's really a longer process, but it is worth it, in my opinion, and also in the opinion of my colleagues. However, today I focus on what this rubric can do for you being an individual teacher in your own course. So not on a program level, but just in your own course. And I think it might help you too, at least that's what I hope. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask me, I don't mind. So I will start from the problem. I will explain why the rubric may help in solving these problems. I will show you the rubric that we introduced at Communication Science and how you can use this rubric in your own course, and the exciting steps that we are still taking right now to improve the tool even more. Okay, so maybe you can take a minute to think about the following situation. Maybe you might recognize yourself a bit in this. So imagine that today you were grading a paper for a 3rd year bachelor course, maybe an academic research project, and you were providing feedback on all sorts of levels. And you had the feeling that you were providing feedback on quite basic academic writing skills. For instance, maybe the research question was still a bit ambiguous, maybe the scientific relevance wasn't yet substantiated properly, maybe sources weren't used properly. And you actually had a sort of déjà vu feeling, because yesterday you were grading a 1st year course and you had an assignment there to grade, and you were actually providing the same type of feedback. Who recognizes this a bit? Yeah, unfortunately many of us do. And this is also our experience at Communication Science, but also across our discipline. Bachelor students seem to not benefit from the things that we teach them in the 1st year. They don't take it along as they grow in our program to the 3rd year, for instance. And this is also what is recently Van de Poel and we had a qualitative interview with a few students in our program, and this is actually what the students themselves mentioned as well. Each time when they are starting a course, it sort of feels as if they start completely with a white sheet, completely as if it's a restart, and they forget all the things that they have learned. So it can feel quite frustrating as a teacher, right? So it's time costly, it contributes to your work pressure. You have to think, for instance, if you're teaching a third-year bachelor thesis course, you want to talk with your students about the exciting research that they can develop, but instead you are providing feedback on very basic academic writing skills. Well, mostly we are doing both. So we are talking with them about their research, but we're also still providing that additional feedback that the student actually in their third year should already master. So it contributes mostly to our work pressure, and it's also a bit frustrating because it impacts our work satisfaction. So, like I said, on a program level, you want to facilitate this sort of cross-curricular, trans-curricular learning that students continue to develop themselves throughout the bachelor. And that is what this rubric was developed for. However, that's not something you as an individual lecturer can easily accomplish. You need the entire program, you need a director involved, and really it's a long-term intervention. But what you can do on a course level is that this a rubric just implemented in your own course can already take over some of your work. So let me show you what we did. This is just a screenshot. I will not yet zoom in too much on it. It's just as a sort of image for this slide. But before I would like to tell you why rubrics may help solving this problem, it's good to have clear what a rubric specifically is. So what I mean with a rubric is that it is a grading form, but it's not just any grading form. It has the criteria over here on the left hand side, like any grading form, and it has already at the top specified a sort of range from excellent to, for instance, needs a lot of improvement. And the specific thing about a grading rubric is that these scores of the student are already specified. So by a simple click as a teacher, you can just provide feedback on all the specific criteria over here. And that makes it a bit different from a regular grading form, so it's more specified. There are lots of other characteristics, but for now, let's leave it at this. So rubrics can be very useful for students because they reflect the learning objectives explicitly. So the idea is that the criteria presented in your rubric link to the learning outcomes that you want your students to master. And they also allow for quite detailed feedback because they demonstrate to the student where they are now when given feedback, and they also provide information like where are you going in the end. So if you want to score higher, then you need to look one cell left to where you are scoring right now to see how you can improve. And this motivates reflection. So people start to consider what do I need to do in order to score higher on this criterion. And also a very nice characteristic is that it provides all students with very consistent feedback because it's pre-programmed what the type of feedback is. So to sum it up, it improves the feedback process. Feedback because students can see very clearly where they are right now when provided with the feedback. Feed forward, they know where they are going because they can see the distinction between where they are now and what they need to do to improve. And feed up because they can also see what they are working towards, what is the final goal. Rubrics can also be time efficient for lecturers if used correctly. It can be a one-click feedback tool where you easily provide feedback with just a mouse click. It's also a reliable way of providing feedback, and it's great for calibrating teaching teams, and this might be especially nice for instance for new lecturers, not only saying junior lecturers, also lecturers new to a course. You might be a bit not confident exactly what you need to grade or what a good and a bad paper is or what a good and a bad score is on a certain criteria, and such a rubric might help to specify what we are looking for on a certain range, on a certain scale. So if you are a bit insecure, you might be a bit slower, and a rubric might, after some training, might help with this. Next to this, the rubric might also help in outsourcing some of the feedback that you as a teacher can give in a formative assessment, so an intermediate assessment. You might outsource this to the students themselves so that they give each other peer feedback. This so students often complain because they don't always think that peer feedback is valuable, but if you have a very clearly structured rubric and you're also training them a bit, then you can outsource this feedback to them as well, and that can limit the time that you are spending on an formative feedback session, so an intermediate feedback session, for instance. Saves you also time. Okay. Now our rubric project at Communication Science. So together with a student and teacher team, and based on lots of feedback from colleagues and lots of colleagues and also the students, we developed the academic writing rubric. We are now on the 3rd version of this writing rubric, and we are still improving, so it's an ongoing process. And we see that it is especially useful as an intermediate, so a sort of formative feedback tool for students. So not yet with a final grade, but sort of like giving them feedback to improve for a later assignment. The rubric that we have developed is designed for an academic thesis that describes a quantitative research study, but I think many parts are also relevant for other writing assignments too that are common here at the FMG. So maybe not all of the criteria are relevant, but many of those I think are relevant also for other disciplines. And it's published right now in Canvas, ready for you to use. So let me show you how you can use it. Now I have to switch a bit with Windows. So imagine that this is an assignment that you have in your course. And in this assignment you want to attach the rubric to it. So I'm opening the assignment. I say, please add the rubric. Now we're going to find a rubric. And here you see all rubrics from all the courses that you're teaching. But you also have here on a faculty level. If you click that one, you have 2 rubrics there, an English one and a Dutch one. The content is the same, just the language differs. So we're going to add the English one. Go all the way down, you say, use this rubric. There it is. So the rubric as it is here now, you can use it as we have designed it for you. You can also edit it. If you edit it, it will save as a copy to your course, but it will never change the master copy. So you shouldn't be scared that you're messing up stuff for anyone else. It's just your own copy. You can't edit it. You can't mess it up. But you could also say, okay, I would like to use it as the way it is. So we have one very ambitious student who already uploaded their assignment. So let's see how this student did. So we need a bit of space because the rubric is quite large. There we go. So here you can see the rubric, and it's important to know that, like I said, it's quite large because it's very detailed, as Jessica already told you. So we can scroll all the way down. So we're starting from the title with the abstract, the research questions, scientific relevance, societal relevance, etc., all the way down to APA. As you can see, all criteria are assigned certain points. In total, the rubric has 100 points to divide. We have used 100 points because otherwise the scores in these cells would be very small and they wouldn't make sense at all. So 100 points would seem to make the most sense. So imagine someone is doing very well on APA, you want to give them an excellent score. You just with one click, you give them the excellent score, and automatically here they get 1 point. You can also manually adjust this. So imagine they did great, but not great enough that you want to give them the full score. Then you can also say, okay, I'm going to manually adjust this to 0.9. And there you go. So you can also do that. You can do it manually, you can use the regular score here. Some other things that I would like to say. Imagine you would like to make a comment on a certain criterion. You could also click here, and then you can say, okay, please elaborate. And then it also saves your comments there. Of course, you can also use the regular interface with SpeedGrader. I assume you're familiar with that, but you can use it also combined with a rubric. Okay, so what were the results of this rubric? The students, we have evaluated 3 cohorts of thesis students. So in the course that we teach them is called the graduation project. And the students, they valued the transparency that the rubric offered them. So as you saw, there were many criteria, all elements that are required in an academic research paper, and they valued the transparency and the information that was already in the rubric, especially for the formative draft. So before they just handed in their final thesis, they received a very elaborate feedback on those criteria. And they valued also the fact that they could see where they were right now and where they were going. So the feed up and the feedback. And they also reported a more goal-directed approach to using this feedback. So that was positive. We were very happy with this. Now for our teachers' feedback. So also 3 cohorts of teachers we evaluated. It was about 17 people per semester. We had qualitative interviews. We received lots of feedback via email, and also we had feedback sessions. And it's good to mention that within our teaching pool, the rubric, overall, everyone was willing to continue working with the rubric and they saw the potential, but the effectiveness of this was really dependent on how teachers were using this. And this is also what I would like to inform you about, so that you know, if you use this, how can you make sure that it will get you the time saver that you are aiming for. So I call this using the rubric smartly, and I will elaborate in a minute what it means to use the rubric smartly. But when you use the rubric smartly, indeed the people then reported it's a quick one-click feedback tool, it's very user-friendly and it works quite well. They also appreciated that we are very transparent about grading criteria and that we are fair to all students. It's also when you are grading 20 students at the last student, you probably have a bit of a different approach than when you were grading the first student, and the rubric sort of corrects a bit for that. The feedback on the draft, so when people were providing feedback on an intermediate assignment, having the rubric facilitated it for them to make less use of notes, for instance, comments, quick marks, track changes in words, speed grader comments, etc. But they couldn't go without it yet, they had the feeling. So they were still using the rubric next to combining it with other types of notes. But for the final version that lecturers had to grade, the rubric really helped them in saving lots of time. It was very efficient. It halved their grading time. So especially for the final version, after they have given intermediate feedback, the rubric helped them halve their grading time. So we were very happy with this result. Okay, but like I told you, this only worked for but for a couple of teachers, for a part of our teaching team. And in our interviews, we noted that this worked specifically if our lecturers took a certain approach in using our rubric. So the smart approach was all these teachers used the standard score of the criterion. So I just showed you in Canvas, you could adjust the score for each criterion. Well, our lecturers who were very time efficient with using this rubric, they almost never adjusted the score. They only manually adjusted it for selected criteria when they really felt like it doesn't really reflect what I want to give them. Or for instance, they only did this when the final grade that was produced by the rubric didn't reflect the grade that they were expecting to give. So this is a tip I would like to give you. This helped for them to save some time. And also, they provided additional feedback. So next to clicking the things in the rubric, they provided it wisely. And what I mean with that is that we saw a distinction in how you can provide feedback on a draft intermediate formative assignment compared to a final assignment. So if you have an intermediate assignment, which is a formative assignment, the goal, of course, for the students is to learn and to make sure that that they can improve for the final version. And then the teachers indeed all had one additional feedback method. So they included some comments, they had some notes, maybe some work with track changes, but they chose one method. Our lecturers who were struggling with the time, they were providing feedback in the rubric, with written comments in the rubric, with comments in the paper, with an additional email. And this not only cost them lots of time, but also their students felt that they were really overloaded with information. Then, for the final version, none of the additional feedback was provided for the teachers who were using the Smart approach. So they didn't include any other feedback comments. And students were actually fine with this. You could still offer them an office hour if they are interested, but many of those students probably won't show up, and this is also what we experienced. Of course, for students who fail, you can use the draft strategy. So you provide them with more feedback so they know how they can complete their paper successfully. So another thing that what teachers do for whom it worked very well is that they copied the draft scores, the scores on the rubric from the draft to the final rubric. So they just had all the scores from the draft, they copied it to the final version, then they checked out the final version of the thesis, and they checked if it improved sufficiently to move one step up in the rubric. That saved them lots and lots of time. And sometimes we have developed a rubric, of course, we tried our best, but sometimes their student work and what the student is writing just doesn't match up with the content of the rubric. It can be very confusing and frustrating as a lecturer to think like, what is the label that I should now give to my students? And then our teachers then mentioned that when you just focus on the labels, excellent, good, moderate, needs lots of improvement, etc., then only use that and elaborate in a comment why they have a certain score. Okay, so so it was very effective, but we still saw one important improvement that we are working on right now. Our students reported that, okay, they know where they are right now, they know what the ultimate aim is, but how do they get there? Our rubric is already very elaborate, but still they want to hear from the teacher, what do I need to do? So what we are doing right now, and maybe some of you already saw it, is that we are trying to make the rubric more interactive by having their supported integrated materials. So let me show you. For instance, at the criterion structure and coherence, imagine you score very low on this and you want to improve, then you can click over here and then it takes you to a YouTube video, and one of our teams in communication science, Irene, also worked on that, and they have created additional materials that teach students how they can work on this. In this case, it's a micro lecture about paragraph structure. It provides additional examples of how you can improve your paragraph. We are right now, and we have plans also with Penny to work on additional materials, not only micro lectures, but also interactive videos, quizzes, to make sure that the student can immediately train in the rubric how they want to improve, how they should improve. And then the teacher doesn't have to do anything besides it because the material is all online. We only have developed 3 videos so far. We are currently working on more videos and also more materials. So the next version that will be uploaded for FMG will include more of this content, so you know what is to come. Yeah. So, like I said, we want to not only do this within one course, but ideally also we want to facilitate transcurricular learning. But this is difficult because many people are involved. So we are now currently also with Penny and with Van de Poel, we are working on developing C-Write. This is an online writing coach, and this tool is integrates all the feedback that students receive on their academic writing. It immediately provides them with the tools to improve on the things they yet want to improve. But at the same time, it also rewards students who already master certain academic writing skills. So if you are, for instance, a mediocre student who normally scores a 6 on academic writing, but you are very good at communicating, for instance, the societal relevance, you can be rewarded in that tool, thereby motivating your academic writing skills. And your work can also serve as an example for other students, and you will get an endorsement on your CV for this specific writing skills. And the idea is that in this way we recognize and we value the skills of our students in academic writing. We try to make it a bit more fun, And the ultimate aim is therefore to empower our students to take responsibility so that the teacher saves a bit of time. Woo! And the project wouldn't have been possible without all these people, so please take a moment to just read their names.
Thank you so much. Okay, is this thing on? I'm looking at the technique people. Yes, awesome. Yes, I will throw it.
I love this thing. FAM always uses these. I remember this one from first year. Now I just wanted to make a comment about the videos. I think it's a phenomenal idea. My question is more, I would not have even thought that there are videos in our rubrics. So my question would be about user experience. Like, how would students be informed that they can click this and get more skills?
Yeah, so I think this has to do again with getting everyone on board. So for instance, at the graduation project right now, the rubric also, in communication science, the rubric there also already has these videos. And the idea is indeed that together with the coordinator, they tell the lecturers like, hey, make sure, point your students to the functionality of the rubric so that they can also outsource these types of learning materials to the videos, to the interactive quizzes, and they do not have to repeat everything over and over. But of course, if it's part of your curriculum, as Jessica for instance said, then you can also have a plenary session where you elaborate a bit on what you want and to elaborate a bit on how you can get into a higher score on a certain criterion. But yeah, it is important because we are planning all these nice things and we are developing them, but ideally you would want the people there in the teaching room to be able to also implement this in the classroom. Yeah.
But also the students to see these things, because sometimes they just don't even read emails. The idea is amazing, and I can see so many of my students using this. They just need to know how to access it, and
yeah, that's true. So the teacher should tell them, I think, when they use the grading form, like mine, that it's interactive. But yeah, that's a bit of a future step that we're taking. But when we have developed C-Write, so the online writing coach, then the idea is really that this all is integrated in the writing coach, and the students then automatically get the message like, hey, this is your learning goal, you formulated this yourself, now work on these exercises so you can improve it. We're not there yet, but yeah, we also hope to be there in a few years. Yeah.
This is a very practical question actually, because one of your time saver tips was just to use the standard score, right?
Yeah.
Which is always the highest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm struggling a bit to grasp the idea of, for instance, the lowest in terms of grading from 1 to 10. It's a 1, 2, 3, or 4, which is a lot, or 4.5 or something, I think. How do you have? How would you translate that into 1 point?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think, I don't know if I have a satisfying answer for you, but how I normally try to treat this, so I try to stay away from the Dutch grading scale because I think it's very confusing, and it immediately introduces a certain idea, and if we're just looking at what the text is in the rubric, and we see, okay, this is what the student is at, then I just click that cell. But I agree, sometimes it might feel a bit that the score is a bit too high. I mean, if you also looked at our rubric, this can be a bit difficult to interpret, right? From 0 to 2. Yeah, what does it mean if you click that, you get 2 points? Isn't that maybe a bit too much then? And how do you translate that from 1 to 10? Yeah.
I just forget the 1 to 10.
I have the feeling that's how I work, and also the lecturers that report to using it like in a smart way and are not too limited by this, they don't consider the Dutch grading scale anymore. It's just the scores in the rubric.
First of all, thank you for trying to figure this out for all of us and making it so available. But I was thinking, I use rubrics, and I do get comments which I don't think, I'm not sure if this can help with it. So for example, well, my feeling is that if a student sees this as a learning tool, I think this works fine. But I have a certain proportion of the students sees feedback much more as teacher accountability. You're going to show me where I lost points. And so I can imagine there would be, for example, one about argumentation, and I fill in that score. But I'm pretty sure that a couple of students are going to come to me, show me where I made a mistake in my argumentation, and then I'm actually doing double work. Is there some way that you, or did you encounter this in the focus groups? Or?
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. You have students who then really start to. I actually received a few this week, who start to sort of complain, like, yeah, I think I do this because here I write this, and I think I deserve a 4 instead of a 3. So what I always try to do beforehand, in the beginning I received lots of those emails, but now I always, before publishing the results, I sort of publish a disclaimer or an announcement where I explain, okay, so we have calibrated, the teaching team has calibrated this tool very extensively. We have discussed all these things. If you score a 3, you scored a 3. If you somehow feel you were treated unfairly, but given sufficient reasons, then we will consider this. But otherwise, this is the score on your criterion, and that helped also to make it a bit more clear. Like, okay, we have been using this correctly. But of course, if they are just interested in knowing why they scored this, and I think as a teacher you should also be able to explain then. I'm not saying if you have a course of 600 students you should all email them, but maybe if it's on an individual basis, I think you should be able to explain. Yeah. If you can't explain, why are they then in a certain...
Oh, but my problem is not... My problem is that I'm actually doing double work. So now I just get comments in the text. This argument is wrong, and this is why, and this is why. So if I do both, then... Yeah, so that's actually...
Yeah,
so
correct.
It's not about not being able to explain. It's about they come to me and they want to know exactly where in the text there's an argumentation wrong.
Yeah, I understand. So that sort of links back to what we were saying also, that our, especially our teachers at a draft version, they still need some sort of other tool to provide feedback on this, to answer these questions. Yeah, that's correct. I hope that if we then include more additional material explaining what a good, for instance, argument is, that they should also be able to deduce that.
Can I add something to that? So I actually had this situation because I've been using a version of this, and one thing I do now is I figure the few students that come to me for feedback, that's when I will add more text in their manuscript before they come to see me. So I do the disclaimer you suggest, but I go further and say, if you want to meet with me for office hours to discuss and understand it more, please go ahead and do so. If, however, you're suggesting that the grade is incorrect, I need a 1A4 at minimum, describing why this is incorrect and making an argument on that. Like, really, because, and then occasionally the one student does actually, and actually sometimes they're right and I made a mistake, and that's completely okay, but that really, I want the power back in my student. You're struggling with this grade, you think it's unfair for some reason, motivate it why to me, write it in advance and submit it to me before the meeting. If you want to just understand a section, happy to meet with you, and then I will then go to that manuscript and add a little bit more comments there. So instead of me doing double grading, it's more for the very few students, and that has made a big difference.
Yeah, that's very smart.